Okay, hi Adrienne. Thank you so much for agreeing to come and chat with me today. I'm really looking forward to talking to you, and it's lovely to see you.
Yeah, it's lovely to see you too, Lalani, and I'm glad to be asked, honoured to be asked to talk to you.
Well, you're a very significant person in the TA community, and if you don't mind me saying, you've been around for a while. I don't know. Don't take that the wrong way. But you know, you've held all sorts of roles, and you've been involved in the UK, you've been involved in Europe, you've travelled all around the world to different conferences and things. So you know, I know that you're a very well known and well loved character within the community. So it's lovely to have you part.
That's nice to know.
I think it'd be lovely to start just to hear a bit about your roots. Like, you know, where did you grow up? Where did you come from? A little bit of your life before you ever came to TA. Tell us a bit about that.
Wow, well, that's a big question. I grew up in the East End of London, the only child of refugees, and they were very, very poor and had to work incredibly hard. And so I was brought up with benign neglect, which was wonderful, really, because it meant I had the world to explore on my own without too much parental interference. And I think that has affected me even today. It's a kind of a willingness to kind of find things out for myself and to explore, and not to depend on what anybody tells me I should think or feel or what makes sense. And I think I learned that right as a very small child, and was really quite independent. But there were no books in our house. My parents just worked hard. And it was only when I went to school that I suddenly discovered books and people and ideas and the mind. And I think I must have been a bright kid because I just loved school, and the teachers who have taught me right from primary school right to secondary school have inspired me. And, you know, even when I went to university, I read English and American literature at university because, again, I was inspired by those teachers. And that's where I met my husband, Brian. He was became eventually a professor of American studies, and he inspired me, and I married him.
So, and I get a real sense of quite an adventurous little spirit, like adventurous as a child, and some level of freedom, and then finding books and finding people that inspired you, and really going from there.
Yeah, and I think I've done that in TA community too. And so coming across TA was really, it was just by chance. In the late 60s, early 70s, I was very engaged with doing all kinds of 60s type stuff, creative encounters with people. I was working in a university, in a college at the time, and we ran a special group. I forget what we called it now. What was it called? Can't remember. And it was a mixture of dance and drama and psychology and encounter group and happening, and you know, it was a mixture of everything, and people were behaving in bizarre ways. They do these bizarre things. And I thought, what the hell are people doing? Why are they doing that? Why are they behaving? And so I thought, I'll go to an adult education class and find out, because there was this little professor called John Alloway who was running a class in group dynamics and transactional analysis. And that was in the 1969, 1970. So I think I came across TA. I mean, I really got involved in TA in about 1971, maybe 72. So that's 50 years ago.
That's quite a while, isn't it?
And of course, I was supposed to be doing research at the university, but I dropped that because I thought transactional analysis was more interesting. I did become a university teacher and spent most of my life working at the university until I took early retirement. But TA has continued to inspire me and enliven me, and I'm really glad that I stayed connected to the growth of TA.
And what was it that you loved about it when you first came across it? So it's like you went to learn about what these crazy people were doing, and it sounds like you may have been part of that. And you went to understand group dynamics. But what was it about TA that first really gripped you?
Well, I think the first thing that got me was that even though it was taught by Professor John Alloway, who was very particular and very precise, it was incredibly simple and yet profound. I mean, it was like the concepts were so rich and yet it wasn't pretentious. It didn't try to be more than what it was. And in fact, the opposite. It was like almost minimalised the significance of what was being talked about, whether that was a psychological game or whether it was ego states or whatever. And I think I was taken with the honesty of it, the authenticity of it, as well as its simplicity and creativity. I liked the fact that there were lots of models, lots of drawings, and being a very visual learner myself, I loved seeing things in pictures and in models. And of course, TA is full of them. I mean, Eric Byrne says it's not TA if it hasn't got a drawing or a model. So.
It's not got a circle or a triangle or something. Yeah.
So I think that attracted me, but also for the first time, even though I'd read many books, I was an avid reader of all sorts of books, but it was the first time that I'd ever really had some of the very complex experiences of my life and my relationships with other people and my way of understanding the world decoded so elegantly, I think is the word I'm going to say. And I thought to myself, I think even at the time, well, certainly my husband disapproved of it at the time, so I had to fight for my involvement in TA for many, many years. But I always thought to myself, well, when this gets boring, or as soon as it starts being deadening instead of enlivening, I'm going to do something else. But I'm still with it.
You're still
so
here.
I guess I'm still enlivening.
Still enlivening. And I was thinking that it's like you met Brian before you met TA. And so he really has travelled this journey with you but on his own, on a different journey.
That's right. Oh, yes. I mean, he's been my companion for 50 years and alongside, I suppose, my TA journey. As I say, he didn't approve of TA. He wanted me to do my academic research and thought it was a distraction.
I'm sure that just encouraged you to do it more, didn't it?
Probably. Although he did say, I can remember him saying, that TA won't get you anywhere, Adrienne. Ha.
He was wrong.
He was wrong.
He was. Okay, so then you carried on so you were still teaching at university?
I was still teaching at university, but I was fascinated with TA, and I started, I was training with John Alloway. Eventually I said, look, can I work with you? And I worked with the adult education classes in the University of Nottingham, Leicester and Northampton for many, many years, teaching TA with John Alloway and with Joe Richards. And then I wanted to do more than just teach the theory of TA. I thought, we've got to practice this somehow. So I set up the Nottingham Centre for Transactional Analysis in 1975, I think it was. And that was a training institute. We would train people in TA, and we would have therapy groups and training groups. And that was probably the first training in the UK for transactional analysis. And I can remember at the time wanting the Institute of Transactional Analysis, that was the UK association, to accredit it at that time. And, but they were kind of a bit unwilling to do that. And I was getting fed up with them. because they were kind of looking at what EATA and the ITAA were doing with their CTA nonsense, whatever it was. And I thought, well, you know, I'm training people. Why can't my training be accounted? And then a pivotal point came and I thought, you know what? I have to do it their way. And so that's when I decided I would become a qualified transactional analyst, a CTA, and get my PTSTA. I think I attended the first TEW with Marilyn Zalkman and others. And Adriennes and who else was there? Oh, various people.
Where was that, Adrienne?
That was in Villars in Switzerland.
Oh, in Switzerland. Oh, yes.
And in fact, I did it with Ian Stewart. Ian Stewart and I had trained Ian Stewart. He was one of the trainers in the Nottingham Centre for TA. And he decided he was going to do this European stuff. So I thought, well, I'm not going to let him get more qualified than me. So I did it as well. And at that time, I can remember we did a workshop at Villars together. We did our CTA at Villars. And then we did our training endorsement workshop the next day. And then on the train going home from Villars, we sat down and worked out a new training program that then became the Bern Institute. So that's where it all began. So that was 1984.
Was born in Switzerland, the mountains of Switzerland.
Can't be better, can it?
How lovely. And so what year did you launch the Bern then? What year was that the Bern started?
Oh golly, I think we started a training which we called TA Central England at first. And that was in 1984. And I think it was 1994 that we bought the premises or changed premises, and we called it the Bern Institute. So the Bern Institute with that name started in 1994. And I did that. I built that up with Ian Stewart, and we had a fabulous partnership of working together, even though we're very, very different.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I mean, you're so well known for that, aren't you? It's like the quality of the training, the culture at the Bern, and you and Ian for so many years, two such very different characters, but who just sort of work together so well.
I know, we were incredibly different, weren't we? Almost direct opposites. But, you know, on that train from Villars, we spent most of that journey doing something which I think is the most important thing we can do. We spent that journey talking about our values and when we realised that we could share the same values, we knew we could work together. And it didn't matter about our differences because we had very different views of theory and how to teach and whatever. And I don't think Ian and I had any conflict at all in what was 30 to nearly 40 years of working together. So It was about the significance of signing up to the same values.
Yes. So you really had that shared foundation.
Yeah. And of course, Ian retired a few years ago now, so I'm running the Bern Institute, not on my own, but with a fabulous team of people. And before it was just me and Ian, really. But now we have a team, and that feels fabulous.
Yeah, that's got a whole different feel to it, hasn't it? And you've got some great people there, I know. Okay, tell me a bit about your ideas in terms of TA. So it's like you started off, you were teaching, first you were learning, then you were teaching, then you formed the Bern. I know that you have some great ideas that you've brought to TA, some of which you've written down, and many of which I know you haven't. But maybe there's a chance to.
Well, you know, it's true that I'm not really a writer. I don't write them down. I am a dedicated teacher. And you can tell why when I told you about my background and how so significant those teachers were for me when I grew up. I think I had decided very young that that's what I would do in life. I would be a teacher and inspire others and hopefully be in the encounter with other people, growing and learning in the way that some of my teachers were with me. And so I'm a teacher, not a writer. And so my ideas in TA, I have ideas about everything in TA. I mean, I know that sounds incredibly grandiose, but you've only got to say a topic or something to me and I will expand it and turn it into a new idea. And I immediately go to the board and play with the idea and expand it. But very few of those have got written up, but they've all got taught.
I've been nagging at you for years to write them down. And having worked with you, I know you have so many great ideas. And yeah, I've got a picture of you just standing up and saying, "Oh yes, let's think about it like this." And some of those ideas, of course, you have written down, haven't you? So the drowning man or the drowning person.
Well, the drowning man is a funny story, really, because with every TA concept, I find a diagram or a drawing to make sense of it. And that's been a significant part of my teaching. And somebody asked me, I think, about what the difference was between script and counter script or something. And I drew this drawing. And the drawing sort of went viral. And it was only a quick sketch, really, just to talk about the difference between script and counter script. And it wasn't a fantastic idea or a major idea, but ironically, that's what most people remember me for.
They do. And the little fish in the water. I like that little bit. But he's not drowning, is he? He's definitely swimming, or he's floating, or he's something, and maybe he's not a he. Maybe he's a person. But also, of course, you've written the book on how to be a transactional analyst. Is that what it's called?
I suppose that's significant for me because. Having been around a long time in TA, I've seen many different schools and different approaches develop. And I've loved them all, to be honest. I mean, as each one has come into the fore, and some of them have disappeared and some of them grown, I've been excited by them and explored them. And I realised that they weren't differentiated anymore in many of our students' minds. So I decided to just gather them together into a little workbook called How to be a Transactional Analyst, and to take each school or each approach in turn and have a look at the different theories, the different background of each, and the different practices of each, so that you could tell the difference. And there was an exercise, a kind of crib sheet on how to be a redecision therapist, or how to be a relational therapist, or how to be a constructivist or something on each school or approach. But that comes from my deep philosophy and value about embracing all the different schools and approaches in TA. And for my trainees and for the people I work with, I suppose I want them to be, to find their own unique integration of the TA theory, and to be the transactional analyst that they want to be, rather than just one fixed school or one fixed approach. But I think if you make a recipe from lots of different ingredients, that's all very well. There may be wonderful recipes that you make. You may get very different kinds of transactional analysts from that. But I also think it's important that people know where they come from, where those ingredients come from, so that they can honour those and also take them back to their own principles, theoretical principles and practice.
And it sounds very similar to what you were saying about you and Ian. It's like within the TA community, we have generally shared values. We have a shared foundation, but there are many different ideas, and all those ideas are good and interesting. And you as a trainer are wanting to inspire people to be who they want to be, and use the bits that they want. But this is a really useful little book, isn't it, to be able to think, oh, that comes from there, or that comes from there.
And what I like about it, Leilani, is the fact that people say to me, well, what kind of transactional analyst are you? Are you relational or whatever? And I say, yes. And they say, are you redecision? I say, yes. Are you? And yes, I'm all. I do more. Yes. And, it's like... I don't want to be defined by one approach. And it's like, I know in my work I use them all in different ways. But I'm most passionate about group work. maybe we could talk a bit more about that, because
let's talk about group work, and let's talk about your other passions. I know that you're very passionate about group work. You're passionate about spirituality and that sort of dimension in the therapeutic relationship and beyond, really. And you're very passionate about our community and abundance and other things as well. Tell me about your passions.
Where shall I start?
So many passions.
It's interesting you talk about my passion for abundance. I'd forgotten that passion. But I did used to do workshops on abundance therapy, really, which was about a focus, if you like, on what is enlivening in our world rather than what is deadening, and the abundance of what is stimulating and enlivened.
And it's interesting as well, in the context of what you were saying about your childhood. It's like, it sounds like there was a real deficit, that there wasn't very much, and that you as an adult embrace abundance, don't you? That there is enough, that there's enough for all of us we can share.
Well, ironically, I mean, it's interesting that you related it back to my childhood, because ironically we were very poor, but I never felt there was scarcity. And I think that's because I had love and space. So my experience, even in childhood, was of abundance, even though I didn't have many toys, or I didn't, do Christmas or anything like that. So there was. I don't think abundance is about material possessions. It is about an attitude of life where you are allowing yourself to experience the vibrance and vitality of what is alive around you. And I certainly used to teach abundance therapy, really, about how to change the mindset from scarcity to abundance. And I think that's been really important for me throughout my life in a way that I'd sort of forgotten. So thank you for reminding me about those workshops. Maybe I should do one of those again sometime.
It's certainly something that I've taken from you, Adrienne. It's like there's times when I'm experiencing scarcity or have some anxiety around scarcity, and I certainly hear you in my head.
Well, I think there'll always be enough if what we focus on is what we get. And it's like, even at this terrible time of what's happening in our world in COVID, where many of us are isolating and separate and haven't got a lot of contact with other people except on screens, and where we're worried about our planet, and where there are people who are being treated so badly, refugees, people of colour. We could focus on so many of the things in life that are really very destructive. But it's like, as we kind of engage, we see, I think, the potential for new humanity to emerge. I think we are at a liminal time when we're moving from one kind of world to another. And I am very hopeful that when we get through this dark time, we will actually get through to a time when we are much more aware of our connection with other people and respect for other people, as well as for our planet and for our world.
Yes, let's hope some good comes out of this. And when you talk about liminal, I'm just aware that people might be listening where English is not their first language. So liminal being the sort of the in-between. The
in-between, the kind of transitory space, the threshold from one state of being or one state to another state. And it's a horrible time. Liminal space, the space between the two, is sometimes horrible. Indeed. Because you've had to leave one world and one life view and you haven't got to the other yet. The other maybe just emerging. and we've had to let go. It's a bit, I sometimes think about it as the kind of the little child learning to walk, you know, and at some point they have to let go of the arm of the chair in order to cross the room to get to the table or to get to that handbag they want to explore or whatever. And they let go and they start to totter forward, and it's like they can't go back now to the safety of that last, and they've got to learn to walk. Or sometimes they don't get there. They plump down on their bottom, and it's like, and sometimes the liminal space is like that we have a struggle sometimes to get from, but we've still got our eye on where we want to get to, and that eventually we move through the liminal space to the next stage of our being.
And I guess sometimes we don't necessarily know where it is that we're wanting to get to, but we know we want to let go of the table. But it's scary, the uncertainty of the tottering, not necessarily knowing if we're going to get there, or but an important stage, as you're saying.
Well, I think the whole world is in that liminal space at the moment. You know, with COVID and with climate change, we don't know what's going to happen, and we're doing hopefully the best we can to make sure that we get to a positive outcome, but not all that we're doing is productive.
That's true. Tell me about your other passions.
I've got so many, I don't know where to start. I've certainly got a passion for group work. One of the things that has disappointed me in TA in many ways is how we have taken the one-to-one, particularly in psychotherapy, the one-to-one relationship as being the therapeutic relationship. And very much, almost, I think, moving backwards to the psychoanalytic process. And I have been a great passionate promoter of TA group work, because TA started as a group therapy, really. Eric Byrne ran groups. And that was really so exciting for me, because groups are different. The kind of therapy, the kind of change work, the kind of work that you can do in a group, of course, as you know, is so different from what you can do in a one-to-one. And, you know, in TA, we've moved away a lot from group work to one-to-one, and I'm doing my best to kind of move us back there to group work so that we can learn more, be more, because we're not just focusing on our individualistic, ego-centered process, but can be part of a bigger whole, whether that's a group or a community or even our worldwide community.
I agree. I mean, we live in groups. We're born into groups. We live in groups. We function in groups, don't we? And we see people differently. You know, just thinking as a therapist, working one-to-one, and then seeing that same client in a group, I get a whole different perspective. So, you're really passionate about carrying that on and sort of reintroducing it. It sounds like this. Yeah,
and I have done, and I think it's about it's not just using the group. It's about what happens when we work in the group. Is that we become part of a we. We become. It's like our work is expanded. Who we are is expanded because we're part of a group process. And I know when I work in groups, one of the things I'm really passionate about is really holding a group in a safe way, so that when one person starts to open up themselves, open the door, as I sometimes say, one person opens a door into maybe their deeper self or their pain, or maybe it's a memory, and other people witness that, it's like other people can go through that door too. And it's like their door's open. And what you have is a much deeper, richer process of healing, of learning, of interconnectedness. And I think this is why I'm now focusing not on autonomy as the goal of TA, but homonymy. I'm passionate about homonymy too, and about focusing on our interconnectedness rather than on our more ego-dominated autonomy.
Good. And again, I'm really aware that most people in the TA community will know the word of autonomy, and probably many of us in the UK know about homonymy because of the work of Giles and others that have been talking about it. But could you say a little bit about homonymy?
I think homonymy is another frame of reference, but it's more than that. It's about, instead of saying, who am I? It's about really engaging more in the encounter with other people and with the wider community and with the planet as a whole. And it's a bit more like, who are we? And it's about, the emphasis is on we-ness, it's on almost like the surrender, I would think, of the self. I would go so far as to use that word, almost surrender of the self, into becoming more. And the more is about our connection with other people and with the wider community and the planet. And
so it's not in a symbiotic, sort of enmeshed, unhealthy way, is it? But it's about we are.
Yeah, it's about ownership and meaning and what is of value and what is real. You see, I'm even though with COVID and even with isolation, I am not a person on my own. Even here, alone in this house now, I'm on a screen talking to you, and maybe other people around the world will eventually see this. I'll be talking to them too. And it's like I am in a relationship with others. And I think that's what keeps me alive. I think if I were just here on my own in this house, I think I would be very diminished.
And I wonder if this situation has really several situations have really highlighted that. So the COVID situation that's worldwide. So it's like we are in this together. You know, there's different things going on, but also other stuff like environment, the environment changing and stuff like that. It's like we are. It sort of brings it home to us more, I think, doesn't it? That we are a system. We are all in this together.
That's right. I was taken with homonymy when I went to the conference in Cochin. I can't remember how long ago that was now. It was about 5 years ago, I guess now, when the terrible floods in Kerala killed hundreds of thousands of people and destroyed their homes and their work. And the conference was isolated. I mean, people who'd got there were then stranded and couldn't leave and couldn't get back home. And people who hadn't got there yet couldn't get there because of the floods. All the roads closed and the railways and the airports, everything just stopped. And we were cut off. And then we were suddenly realizing that we were part of a much bigger community and what was happening there. And I was giving the keynote speech at that conference, and it was going to be on culture or something like that. And I can remember change, because the conference sort of went ahead with those people who were there, although it was very much focused on what was happening in the country at that time, and very heartfelt. But I remember changing my keynote speech. I just was in my hotel room, surrounded by floodwater, and I thought to myself, this speech is not enough. I have to change it. And I didn't really know what I was going to say, but I determined that I was going to talk about homonymy, which Keith Tudor first talked about. It was my first introduction to homonymy when he talked about it. And I can remember emailing him that night before my speech, saying, I'm going to talk about homonymy. Tell me, give me some stuff to talk about. hoping that I would get something back from him so that I could have some references. And he did contact me, and I got a few quotes and things that I could use. But it's like it was at that point that the real understanding and importance and significance of homonymy and our interconnectedness and how significant it was for us to be part of a much bigger community and be responsible in that community really hit me. And it was a very significant speech for me and a significant event for everybody who was there. Yes. And I know you've been so involved in working with refugees and with the wider community in Milan, so I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I think we have a similar passion, don't we, and value for giving and being part of the community, like giving to the community and nourishing it, doing what we can to nourish that. And I'm really aware that that you really have been very generous in this community in different roles that you've had in the ITA. You were EATA president, weren't you? And you made some sort of major changes and. And just generally at conferences, travelling all around the world and giving your time and energy. And it'd be lovely to hear a little bit about that. That wasn't a very focused question, was it? But tell me about...
It's true. I mean, it does follow on from what we were talking about, because one of the things that has delighted me is about how, what a wonderful community the TA community is internationally. And, it's like our trainees train in one little training institute, and then they discover there are other training institutes in the same country and they do it differently, and then they discover, oh my goodness, there are training institutes and transactional analysts all over the world. And for me, it's not enough to be just in a small box. We are part of a much bigger community, and I have always invested in and promoted and enjoyed the wider community of TA. And that's why I go to the conferences and I give workshops everywhere and have taken on roles in the international organisations because it matters to me. It matters to me to be and hold a bigger community.
Yeah, you want to be involved, don't you? You want to, and also I think it's about connection for you as well, isn't it? It's like you want to meet people and be out there and travel and be connected to different cultures. And again, I'm sort of, I'm struck by what you were talking about in terms of your early life, your parents being refugees, and it's like, it sounds like you really are a citizen of the world. You don't necessarily identify just as being one thing, that you like to connect with people.
Well, it's interesting you to say that, because that's what I was just connecting with just now. I was just thinking about, why is that so important to me? Why am I so invested in not just being in the TA family or tribe, but actually being active in holding that tribe together and wanting to enrich the tribe? And I think it actually comes from my heritage. My father was a Holocaust survivor, and his family were separated and many of them didn't survive. So what has been fundamental, if you like, in my script or in my whole fabric of being is how we could fragment for whatever reason. And so it's become an imperative for me to hold the community, to hold the family, to hold the bigger space, not just to focus on individual survival. It's not enough. So I think there is something there. That's what I suddenly started thinking about when you were talking.
That it's about holding things, wanting the community to be a whole, wanting us to travel together and be together.
Yeah. And also wanting the community to be the best that it can be. And I think, that I'm okay, you're okay, it sounds so glib, but it still brings tears to my eyes as I really connect with what that means. That really authentic acceptance of the other. and of the self. And, you know, I think it needs to be a kind of the we are okay, really.
And I wonder if this fits for you in terms of your passion about a spiritual dimension as well. Are you interested in talking about that? I'm just aware of, in my mind, seeing you draw the ego states and then drawing a bigger ego state around the outside.
That's right, yeah. I am passionate about that too, because it seems to me that ego isn't enough. And I think that's one of the ways is to move it to homonymy and to our awareness of the planet. But another one is to also to get in touch really with the core of the human spirit, as Muriel James talked about it. And it's like, it's rather simple to talk about physis and the physis energy, but that was a brilliant little throwaway diagram really that Eric Byrne did that has been so inspirational really, which is about, he did account for something that came right from C0 and went out beyond ego, which he called the force of nature. He never called it the divine or anything spiritual, but that's how we can interpret it. And it is a force which I see as the core of the human spirit that we have inside us. And our job is not just to inform people's minds or even inform people's hearts, but also I think the work that we do is soul work. And we need to take our responsibility as transactional analysts and know that we are working profoundly with the spiritual core of people that we're working with. Not just their behaviour, not just their thinking, not just...
And do you encompass all of the fields in terms of that attitude? Are you thinking just about counselling and psychotherapy, or are you thinking about wider applications of TA as well?
No, I'm thinking about wider applications too. I'm thinking about, for example, how as an educator, for example, my job isn't just to teach facts. It isn't just to enable somebody to pass an exam. For me, it's not about the attainment of credentials, or it is about, and in fact, it's lovely because in a recent article, Giles Barrows talked about this very eloquently, and he talks about the encounter that we have and the encounter of the educator. And for me, the encounter is a spiritual one. It is about the connection between the educator and the learner, and something that happens in that process that is God, it's profound, really. I don't have words for it. But as soon as I said it, I just suddenly thought back to those significant teachers who've been there in my life and about trying to understand what was it that they taught me. And it wasn't what they taught me. It was their being that they shared with me, their passion that they shared with me. And that felt to me something that touched my soul and my spirit, not just my mind. And so certainly I think as educators, we are working far more than just with material that we want people to learn. We are working with, I think, an encounter that is much more profound. And when we're working in organisations, it's so easy to lose sense, really, of our higher values and our higher purpose in doing the work that we do. And for me, when working in organisations, my primary job is to inspire the leaders to recognise that they are more than just managers, or they are more than just people who are producing a product for profit, but actually have a far more important role, which is to I think, to hold the spirit of the organisation. And those organisations that have opened their core, if you like, to higher purpose are those that are most successful. And when I say higher purpose, I'm not talking about religion or anything like that. I'm not even talking about God. I'm talking about a purpose that goes beyond the product.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more about the core self of the people. It's like organizations are not just about producing something, but organizations are made up of people, and people have core selves and values and passions, and they're not just machines. Yeah, lovely, nice.
So I suppose all my passions come together, really. They're all linked. But,
spirituality, group work, being a part of, it's all stuff that's really important to you, isn't it?
To be honest, Leilani, I'm passionate about all of TA theory. There are very few bits of TA theory that deaden me. If they do, I try and enliven them.
Tell us about one that deadens you. You can't be passionate about all of them.
What deadens me?
What are you slightly less passionate about? Let's say that.
I don't know. I mean, well, let me just give you the example that came to my head straight away, right? Which some people may not even know this bit of theory, but sweatshirts. Do you remember Eric Burns' work on sweatshirts? And he kind of gets this glib idea that, we come into a room with something labelled on the front of our sweatshirt or T-shirt that says, this is the image I want to present to the world. And when we leave the room, people see what you really are, because there's on the back, it says something quite different. So on the front, it might say, I don't know, I love everybody. But on the back, it says, but I love myself most of all, or something like that. Now, it's not a very exciting bit of theory. But even as I said that, even as I thought about it, I thought, actually, it's not that deadening. It's not that. You could see how even taking that simple idea could be very significant in terms of inviting people to be their authentic self.
That's because of your creativity, isn't it? That's because it's like you take the idea and then you think, oh, how can I play with
that?
Yeah,
exactly. So it's like we can enliven even the most deadening idea, because the whole idea that you could be in charge of what you put out there to the world, and that the message on the back could be the same as what's on the front if you have integrity and if you are your authentic self. That is exciting. And now I want to write some more theory.
There's another thing that you should write up. There's another bit of theory you should write up.
But this is what I mean. It's like, even some of the deadening bits of theory suddenly can become enlivened if we bring our passion into it, and also
we breathe life into them. Isn't it? It's like we can deaden them and we can enliven them.
So I love TA and I love TA theory, and I think it has. It's continued to grow. Thank goodness. We have many different theories. As we speak, more books are being written, and it's so exciting that TA has continued to grow, and we don't get bored with it.
Tell me what your frustrations are about TA or about the TA community.
Regulation. For me, sadly, one of the great advantages in TA is that it has been recognised by universities and by professions as being a valid currency for accreditation and for careers. And I'm pleased about that, because that does give us worth and value in the world with other professionals. But what has happened, of course, is that we are regulated and regulated and more regulated until we get into ridiculous spirals of, how many hours of therapy have you got to have had before you can give it. It's like as if things could be quantified in hours. And inevitably when we're passing exams, people want more and more detail about what do I have to know? What am I going to be asked? What is the right answer? So to be absolutely honest, that's what frustrates me most, and that's what I feel is necessary if we want to keep TA a valid currency, if you like, out there in the professional world. But that's what frustrates me most.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's sort of a narrowing, isn't it? Whereas TA theory is about expanding and growing and exploring, and then it's like, yeah, and then it feels like there's this like, oh, and you've got to...
Everybody wants to fit it into everybody else's got a box or a container. And so, you know, I'm joining the committees, even though I've got no time anymore, really, but I'm still trying to be active in the committees that are making these decisions to try to calm them down and soften it. You know, it's like we need space.
Yeah.
We need the space for emerging approaches and theory. Like, for example, about now we're all online, aren't we? Because we have to be. And it's like the regulators are coming in now, as we speak, saying things like, oh, well, how many hours are you allowed to have online? And how many have... And you think, what? You know, it's like, you know, we have to, if the world has changed, if things have changed, we have to be expanding into it, not trying to box it into what is yesterday's way of doing things or thinking of things or believing about things.
Absolutely. So. And where would you like to see the TA community or TA theory go from here? It's like, where's the next place you would really like to see us go?
Well, one answer to your question is I want to see it keep going. I want to see it not just going to the next place, but for me, I want to see TA constantly expanding and exploring new ways of being relevant in the world. And I'm excited by the new eco-TA. It seems to me that's the new movement in TA, and I love the way TA has been promoted by Giles Barrow and Hayley Marshall particularly, and others, into taking into account our encounter with the world outside, with the planet, with nature, with the world itself. And I think that's really exciting about where TA is going at the moment. But I don't want it just to be that either. You know, it's like I want the next thing after that. You know, I don't want us ever to think that we've finished. So what I'm passionate about in TA is that we continue to grow and to expand and to be creative and to be responsive to what is stimulating now, rather than try to say what was yesterday's rightness and say that is always going to have to be right.
Absolutely, and that was what Byrne wanted, wasn't it? It's like ever evolving and developing, and let's not ever stagnate. Let's continue to.
That's right.
Embrace change, and sometimes that's challenging, isn't it? But it's also so rich.
I think it is. It's innovative, and people get frustrated with Eric Byrne because he contradicted himself sometimes. He changed his mind. Thank goodness he did. You know, it's like, you know, he was so creative and so abundant. You know, he's written more than has been published. I mean, it's all sitting there in archives, stuff still that he wrote. And it's like that kind of abundance is wonderful and amazing. He just wanted everything to just keep growing and expanding.
Yeah.
So
yes, and he gave us some foundations, didn't he? He gave us some foundations that we've grown from. I'm really aware of the time, and I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you would like people to know about you.
I don't know. Just that I intend to keep going as long as I can. I've always said that, you know, one of my rules of life is that if it's still enlivening, I'll do it. And if it's deadening, I'll stop doing it. And I often tell people that. And I think what we need to do is to make TA as well as our community and our planet enlivening. And, while I'm still enlivened, I'm going to go on teaching TA and practicing TA. If ever it gets deadening, I'm out. I think that's what I want to say, really, is that let's keep it alive and vibrant.
Yeah. And certainly you are one of the people that keeps TA vibrant, and just the passion that you bring, the generosity that you bring is just a lovely part, such an inspiration in terms of, a figure in the TA community that does really embrace people, embraces ideas, embraces development, embraces change, embraces floods, embraces, it's like you are, you are an
I like being called an embracer. I think that sounds good.
You are an inspiring embracer.
I think
in
that's
the widest sense of the word. Not just of the individual embraces, but also wider embraces as well. So,
thank you, Leilani. It's been such a delight talking to you, and it's a pity we can't actually embrace right now, but we're doing the best we know how.
Yes, yeah, we are. Thank you so much for being willing to be here and be a part of the project. And yeah, from me personally, it's just lovely to be able to spend an hour with you.
For me too, because I love and respect all that you've given to the TA community, and that's been very significant and important for me.
Thank you.
I just want to say to everybody who hears this, play your part, be involved, be active, be responsible, and be the best transactional analyst you can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're all a part of this. We're all a part of this. Lovely. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll end.
Bye-bye.
Bye.